Hola, muy buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Bueno, estamos en nuestra última sesión de datos y relatos del año. Recuerdo que datos y relatos es un espacio de charlas tipo masterclass que se centran en la evolución de las tecnologías y cómo ha influenciado pues, en la construcción de nuevas formas de narrar. En esta última sesión del año, pues estamos con una invitada muy especial. Nuestra invitada es Sarah Friend. Y pues digamos que la sesión de este año se llama Blockchain 101. Al principio estaba el Bitcoin. Pues para contarles un poco acerca de Sarah Friend, pues bueno, ella es una artista ingeniera de software especializada en blockchain y en la web P2P. Participa en el programa para artistas de Berlín, es co-curadora de Ender Gallery, que es una residencia artística que tiene lugar dentro de Minecraft, que es un videojuego, y pues es exalumna de Recure Center, un retiro para programadores, y organizadora de Our Networks, una conferencia sobre todos los aspectos de la web distribuida. Forma parte del consejo asesor y ha sido la responsable de los contratos inteligentes de Cycles UBI, una moneda comunitaria basada en blockchain que pretende lograr una distribución más equitativa del capital económico. Y bueno, ha trabajado como responsable técnica de Culture State, un proyecto que utiliza el voto cuadrático para tomar mejores decisiones sobre la financiación de las artes. También es cofundadora de Beats Possessed, una consultoría de arte y desarrollo de software que funciona como una cooperativa. Entonces, bueno, también estamos junto con Henry Caicedo, que hace parte pues, del equipo de la Cinemateca desde Archivo Vivo y Memoria. Entonces también entramos con Henry.
Hola Dani, muchas gracias. Un saludo para quienes nos acompañan en esta sesión. Es una hora difícil. Sencillamente quería mencionar un poco las motivaciones que hay detrás de esta transversalidad con Media Lab y experimentación desde el archivo de la Cinemateca de Bogotá, entendiendo la blockchain como un sistema distribuido y descentralizado que permite tener un registro de cada transacción que ocurre dentro de ese sistema. Los archivos, por supuesto, para que puedan de alguna u otra manera tener autenticidad, integridad, pues requieren unos mecanismos mucho más evolucionados, y la blockchain es una de esas soluciones. Más allá de todo el sistema, ¿no?, de tokenización que se maneja dentro de la cadena de bloques. Bueno, yo creo que pues podemos darle la bienvenida a Sara, comenzar de una vez. Esta es una sesión en dos idiomas. Sara, su idioma es el inglés. Nosotros hemos hecho un esfuerzo para dejar subtitulado dos de las secciones de esta presentación que nos va a hacer Sara. Hay una tercera que vamos a tratar de hacer algo un poco inusual, donde en ese momento pues trataremos de explicarles bien dónde están los fragmentos, ¿no?, para completar la tercera sesión. Y por supuesto pues tendremos la posibilidad de conversar con Sara al final. Yo estaré haciendo las veces de traducción, no simultánea, pero sí estaremos haciendo una traducción muy, muy tranquila, ¿no? Entonces pues bienvenidos, bienvenidas, dejen sus preguntas, sus dudas, impresiones, comentarios en nuestras ventanas de chat. Estamos en YouTube, estamos en Facebook, y bueno, bienvenida Sara.
Welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you very much for this talk. We have been talking for months for this talk.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, thank you also for inviting me. It's a different experience to be doing a recorded talk because I'll just chill out and watch with the rest of you all until the question period.
Bueno, muy bien. Sara nos dice que pues está muy emocionada de esta invitación. Además, pues es una sesión pregrabada, así que pues ella será una espectadora mientras tanto. Entonces, nos vemos más o menos en unos 30 minutos nuevamente con Sara. Bueno.
See you in 30 minutes.
Thank you, Sara.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's talk called Blockchain 101. In the beginning, there was Bitcoin. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to Daniel and Henry from the Cinemateca de Bogota for inviting me to speak to you today. My name is Sarah Friend. I'm an artist and software developer. I've been working in the blockchain industry in both capacities since 2016. I'm sure you've heard of Bitcoin. It was the first blockchain. It was launched in 2009. Now, of course, there are many others, including Ethereum, Tezos, Solana. You may have heard of some of those. Our goal today is to talk about them in a general sense, things that are true about all of them, as well as some of the differences. In more detail, there are 3 chunks of the talk. First, sort of the basics, the questions people always ask and a bit of a definition of what a blockchain is. If you remember anything, remember this. Then we're going to dive a little deeper into some of the more technical blockchain mechanics. And then we're going to end by talking about blockchain art. There's been a lot of press and interest in NFTs this year, so we're going to talk about those and look at some examples. So first, getting started. I actually kind of like to start by looking at the popular definitions of blockchain. So what do you get when you Google what is a blockchain? I actually pulled 3 of them here for this slide, and I will say that these have gotten a lot better over the years. These are all pretty accurate, and this was not always true when I started working in this field. So there are some commonalities, things in all of them. The first one I want to draw your attention to is highlighted here in yellow. It is ledger. So we'll look at what is a ledger. And the other one I want to look at right now is record transactions. So both of those are in all of them. What does that mean? You may have come across a ledger or used one if you've done any accounting. This might look familiar to you. A ledger is a document or spreadsheet or something maintained by software on your computer. It could also be kept on paper. It keeps track of the state of a series of accounts. So basically how much money is kept where. This is what your bank has. It has a ledger for all of the accounts. What money is held by who, where. And the way that this ledger is maintained is by recording transactions. So every time money moves in and out of any account, that is a transaction. It gets added to the ledger and updates sort of this state or overview of what is everywhere. So here in this diagram, sort of each line represents a transaction. And broadly speaking, this is also all true about blockchains. So the other thing that is in these definitions that I think is in common, though it uses slightly different words in each one, and also quite important, is that this ledger is decentralized, distributed, public, shared, open, etc. And what does this mean? So this image gets used a lot in the blockchain world, and has become kind of a cliche, but we're using it here still, despite that, in the interests of introducing you to the canon. So in the image here labeled centralization, we have sort of these many little dots all connected to sort of one central point. And this is actually the bank model for maintaining the ledger. So if you want to know how much money is in your bank account, you ask your bank. They're in charge of keeping track of everything. Everyone is asking the same place. In the other two pictures, which are labeled decentralization, decentralized and distributed, and I will say that in practice, people don't really distinguish between these two terms in this way and have a tendency to use them interchangeably. They both sort of show a ledger being stored in many places. So when the user wants to know the state of the ledger, what money is where, etc., there are many possible places to ask. Indeed, maybe everyone is storing the ledger, so all the accounts are talking amongst each other. They can ask anyone. And of course, in this model, we run into all kinds of interesting problems. For example, how do all of these different people in different places agree about the state of the ledger? And we'll talk about that a little bit in the second section on mining. So first off, just a kind of general thing, when you go to interact with the blockchain world or cryptocurrencies, there are sort of two main places that you might be doing that. The first is exchanges, and the second is wallets. A lot of people start with exchanges. You might have heard of some of these really big ones called like Coinbase or Binance are big global ones. There are also sort of smaller regional exchanges. And typically this is where people start. Exchanges often support many currencies and are actually a trading platform. So you can sort of deposit fiat and then buy crypto and trade there. They usually these days require KYC or know your customer. So what that means is that you'll have to identify yourself with your passport or some other type of ID before you can really use them. And what these exchanges are doing when you deposit fiat into them or crypto or buy crypto on them is they're holding that crypto in escrow for you, which is to say it's not necessarily interacting with the blockchain every time you buy or sell crypto on there. It's sort of this actually somewhat centralized marketplace for interacting with the blockchain world. In terms of wallets, they're a bit different. They are software usually that you download onto your computer or mobile phone. And they often support only one chain or one kind of blockchain. On these, you have your own private key, which we will talk about a little bit on the next slide. And sometimes you'll hear these described as non-custodial. So these usually do not require KYC. So you don't have to identify yourself to them in any way. You just download them and use them. But you also can't usually buy crypto through them. You have to buy it somewhere else and then put it in your wallet to store. There are sort of pros and cons of both wallets and exchanges, and also risks to both. So with an exchange, the biggest risk really is that the exchange is robbed or turns out to be a scam. There have been a couple of those historically, unfortunately. And it might seem unlikely, but I will tell you that it has happened to me. And in terms of wallets, you have sort of a different risk. There's no sort of external risk. No platform going down really can take away what you have in that wallet. But the biggest risk is that you yourself might lose your private key. So let's talk a little bit about accounts and private keys. We've also talked about the concept of accounts in a ledger. What is your account? Usually it's identified by an address, which might look a little bit different depending on which blockchain you're using or which wallet you're using. Here are two examples. Just this sort of long string. This is not very user-friendly, but unfortunately, this is often how it is. Your address is public, and it's how you are identified on the blockchain. You also have a private key. And the analogy to an account outside the blockchain world is that your address is like your email address. You can share it, it's known, but your private key is like your password. So you're going to keep this safe. You're never going to share it with anybody. And you might see in different wallets or different interfaces alternative names for private key. So it could be called a seed phrase, a mnemonic, secret words, magic words, passphrase, a variety of different things. It could also be a long string of numbers or letters, like your address, but longer. But despite its different sort of names, the core key feature is that you need to keep it secret, and also that it can't be reset, unlike a sort of password that you might be familiar with. If you remember the decentralization diagram, where you have this sort of ledger stored everywhere with maybe no one person who is the authority for maintaining it. The reason your private key can't be recovered if you lose it is because no one has the power to do that. There's sort of no authority who can say, this is the new private key associated with this account. So this is a difficult thing to get used to when you're interacting with blockchains, but I want to highlight it. And also, if they're saying, or to specify, that this is mostly something you have to worry about if you're using a wallet. Indeed, one of the main ways to identify a wallet from an exchange is whether you have a private key that you can export. It's probably hidden away somewhere in the settings, but if it's there, you have a wallet. An exchange is a different model. You might have several addresses lumped with one account. You probably log in with your email address and password. They can probably reset your password. Like I said, a different risk profile for the two systems. This is a related question to wallets and exchanges, actually, in a way, but it often gets asked. How do you buy crypto? If you want to get started, you need to get some somewhere. And the most common way that people do this is an exchange, like I said. There are many that work in many different countries. There are many that work in Colombia. I learned recently that the Banco de Bogota has a pilot program running with an exchange called Buda.com. I haven't used this system, obviously, since I'm not in Colombia, so I can't recommend it personally in that way, but it might be worth looking into. Or any other, large reputable exchange. The other sort of way to do it is to set up a wallet on your own and use a crypto vendor site. One that I like is called MoonPay. It does also work in Colombia, and you sort of send your fiat money or dollars or pesos to it, and then it will send crypto to the address that you give it. So if you've made and downloaded a wallet on your phone, you can have that money deposited there through one of these vendor sites. And then finally, through a friend or a person who has some that they want to sell. This used to be the only way. Now I'm not sure I can really recommend it because it's a bit riskier, but it is still possible. And there's a website called Local Bitcoins that people use to sort of find people near them who are selling their Bitcoin. But like I said, probably the safest and easiest way is with an exchange. Right, so we talked a little bit earlier on about what is a transaction, which is this thing that is getting recorded on the ledger. You create these from within your wallet. Indeed, it's the main thing wallets do. They send transactions and display the balance of your account. Every time you send crypto to someone, what you're doing is sending a transaction. My definition of a transaction is a signed message indicating a user's intent. And so what is this signature thing? If you imagine we have this public ledger and copies of it are getting stored all over the world. If you want to send someone money, how do you identify yourself? How do you identify that it's really coming from you? So here's a theoretical transaction or message from Jessica sending $10 to me. In the non-blockchain world, she might write me a check and sign it with sort of an analog signature, but she can also create a digital signature with her private key. This can be checked by everyone who has a copy of the ledger to verify that the message actually comes from Jessica. And we won't get into the mechanics of how that works, but this is also something that if you have a wallet, it will be doing for you in the background when you're sending a transaction. And it's also why it's so important to keep the private key secret. Anyone who has it can spend the money in that account. So it happens a lot using a blockchain that you might want to check the state of the ledger. Maybe you have a wallet and you sent money to someone from it, and your wallet shows you that it worked, but you want to back up what it's showing you by looking somewhere else. There are these services that people use to do that that I can recommend. This is one called Etherscan, that's for the Ethereum blockchain. But there will be a similar one for every blockchain. They're called block explorers. So this is the homepage, and you can see a bunch of data. You can see sort of the latest transactions that have happened. You can see sort of some general reviews. And so if you want to see your actual transactions from you can search your account. You'll see a list of things that you have sent and received. And you can even look at the particular transactions to see what they're doing. So here, we see who this is from, we see where it's going to, and it's parsed out what it's doing. So this transaction is sending tokens to someone else. And all this information is publicly viewable. So if ever you're not sure sort of the state of the ledger, you can check the Block Explorer to get a sense of what's going on. And you'll notice also at the bottom here, it says a transaction fee. So this is something people have a lot of questions about, and we won't go into it in too much detail, but basically, every time you send a transaction, you also pay a transaction fee. And there are also two types of transaction fees, not to be confused. The first one is on the blockchain directly, which is what you will pay if you're sending a transaction from a wallet. You pay this fee to the miners, who we'll talk about a little bit in section 2. And the amount of the fee that you pay is set by the market. So the more people who are trying to send transactions at the same time as you, you sort of have to outbid them to get your transaction to the front of the queue to get processed. And so if you hear people talking about really high transaction fees, it's probably because many people are trying to use that blockchain at once. Now on exchanges, you also pay a transaction fee, but it's a bit different. It's not set by the market. It's set by the exchange. It's sort of a flat fee for all of your trades or whatever. So you have fees in both places, but the nature of them is different. And finally, this is a bit more of an abstract question, but people ask it a lot, and that is, where does the value come from? A lot of the press around cryptocurrencies talks about sort of these huge price spikes or bubbles collapsing and people losing money, and that might all seem very irrational. And on some level, I am here to tell you that it is. This is a sort of speculative, risky place. And the value, to some extent, value does come from utility in this world, but a much greater portion of it is from other factors. I think the main and only real answer to where value comes from is that value is the product of social consensus. And this is to say that, the reason Bitcoin becomes valuable, the reason it is valuable now when it wasn't in the past, is basically because a significant enough mass of people have decided that it's valuable. They are willing to pay this amount of money for it. And you see this actually all the time in terms of other commodities or assets that you might be more familiar with. Why does the dollar have value? The dollar has value, well, for many socio-political reasons, but at its base layer, a significant amount of people have decided that it does. And also, in terms of other types of assets like gold, for example, why is gold so valuable? Well, it's not because it has so many industrial use cases. Yes, it's rare, but there are many things which are rare that aren't priced the same way. And it's this historical social consensus that has built up around this asset in terms of its value. So this isn't a technical answer, and it might be somewhat unsatisfying, but to be honest, I think it is the most true one. And if you want to talk about it more, we can in the question period. So blockchain mechanics, section 2. Don't be afraid. We're going to look at some of the slightly more technical aspects of how blockchains work. So we've mentioned this a few times in the first section, and you may have heard of it, mining. What is mining in the blockchain context? Well, the way a blockchain is updated is by creating a new block. And a block is basically just a bundle of transactions that have been processed and added to the ledger. What the miners are doing is creating these bundles or blocks. They're doing the work of maintaining the ledger. So all of those nodes all over that we saw in that decentralization diagram, those are miners sort of doing that work. And for doing this, because it is work, the miner gets a small payout or reward for creating and processing this bundle of transactions. But if miners get a payout for creating a block, why don't they do it all the time? How do we decide who gets to mine the next block? The answer is a consensus protocol, which is built into the blockchain. It's part of its software. And this is sort of a protocol that everyone participating in this blockchain has agreed upon using to answer these questions about who is mining the next block and when it can happen. Different blockchains use different consensus protocols, and there are two main types. And the two main types of consensus protocols, keeping in mind there are many, and in your reading list, there's a document outlining, just how many there are and all of the differences between them. But still, the two main categories that you'll hear about are proof of work versus proof of stake. Let's break them down a little. In proof of work, miners have to do work that is computationally hard. So you may have heard about mining farms, computers as big as a room, etc. All of that is true. These miners are competing with other miners in a proof of work blockchain to solve this sort of computationally hard puzzle first. So they devote a lot of computer power to it. And in a sense, they've made an investment in that network in the form of all of this equipment and hardware, which gives them an incentive to keep that network running. Because if they sort of behave badly or tried to cheat or weren't sort of an honest maintainer of the ledger, that blockchain would not be useful anymore. People would lose trust in it, probably stop using it, and I'm sure it would become less valuable. In a proof of stake system, you have a sort of more direct mechanism here. It requires miners to lock up cryptocurrency. So they're still sort of investing in the network in a way, because they're putting their cryptocurrency at stake. If they are not an honest maintainer of the ledger here, the cryptocurrency that they locked up will get taken from them. So there's sort of a similarity in parallel, in that the miners have sort of invested in some way in the future of this protocol. And looking a little bit or talking a little bit more about this sort of computationally hard puzzle that the miners in proof of work networks are trying to solve. What they're actually creating is a proof of work. They are literally proving that they did a certain amount of work, that the computer did a certain amount of work. And so a good proof of work is something that is difficult to create, but easy to verify. So it takes a long time to get, but to verify it is very quick. And to give an analogy from the non-blockchain world, I like to use a university degree. So obviously this is difficult to get. It takes years, 3 or 4 or 5, but it's easy to verify. I see your diploma. If I really want to check, that it's valid, I could probably call the university, but that's much, much faster than you spent getting it. So we have sort of proofs of work in other contexts too. Another key difference is sort of who gets to mine the next block. In a proof of work system, it's the first person to solve the puzzle. So there are all these computers and miners are racing against each other. In a proof of stake system, it's often elected by others or chosen randomly, or sometimes based on who has put the most money at stake. But still, there's no sort of race or competitiveness in the same way going on between the miners. This is a subtle distinction, but you'll hear people talk about it. In a proof of work context, the data can be verified independently with no outside input. So sometimes people like to argue that it's a bit more secure. And this has to do with the proofs of work that are getting created. So, I have this sort of literal chain of blocks or ledger. And if I wanted to check that I had, asked for a copy of it and you'd given me the correct copy, I could check all of the results of all the proof of work puzzles that have been solved. And because they're so difficult to create the right answer, if they all check out and are all correct, I know that there could be sort of no competing fake copy. In a proof of stake system, I do sort of need some outside input to verify that I got the right copy from you. So usually there will be some type of authority or an elected set of authorities who you can go to check this. And so this is a subtle one, but people do sometimes talk about it. And finally, I would expect you've heard about this because it's been the subject of many headlines, but proof of work blockchains use lots of energy because, like I talked about, these massive computers running at full blast competing. Proof of stake uses a very small amount of energy. I've seen it compared to send a transaction, to sending an email. So, this is a big difference. Just to visualize it for you, here we have Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are both proof of work blockchains compared to Tezos, which is a proof of stake blockchain. And you'll see that Bitcoin and Ethereum, both using proof of work, are still an order of magnitude different in terms of the amount of electricity they're using, which is to say that not all proofs of work are equally energy intensive to find. And not all blockchains have the same amount of computers running on them trying to sort of solve the problem. But still, when you compare either proof of work blockchain to a proof of stake blockchain, it's an order of magnitude different. You can't even really see the bar for Tezos because it's so small. Smart contracts. This is a big distinction between different blockchains. Some blockchains have smart contracts and others don't. Bitcoin does not. Smart contracts didn't really exist around the time that Bitcoin was created. Ethereum was the first blockchain to have smart contracts, and now many blockchains enable some type of smart contract. So you'll hear about these. What does it mean? So instead of storing only the latest state of a ledger, if a blockchain enables smart contracts, it can also store code and the sort of current state of that code. So here the transactions might, some of them might be a sort of ledger transformation, me sending money to someone else, but it could also be code and code execution. Looking at this a little more, I sometimes like to use a smartphone actually as an analogy. Your smartphone is kind of this system and it has a state. So each app on your smartphone, you can think of it like a little smart contract. Each app sort of has its own set of things that it does. It has its own things that it stores. They can interact with each other if they need to, but they're mostly self-contained. All of them globally have a sort of state. So if your smartphone was a blockchain, the apps would be smart contracts. And in this context, when we're dealing with a blockchain that has smart contracts, the transaction, what a transaction can be is a little more broad. So we already defined a transaction as a signed message indicating a user's intent. And in the case of a simple ledger, that is pretty much limited to I want to send money to so-and-so. But in the context of a smart contract, it could be any number of things. So it's more like I, Alice, want this computer to, and then it could do anything. It could store a variable or a bit of data. It could deploy or create a new computer program. It could destroy itself or destroy another program. And of course, it could do the classic thing, send money. So the transaction is a bit more expanded in terms of what it could possibly be encompassing. So what is a token? You might have heard of these. They're one of the most common use cases for blockchains that have smart contracts. NFTs are tokens, but there are also other kinds of tokens. And this is the most literal definition of a token that I can give. A token is data in a smart contract that conforms to a standard interface. So there are many tokens running on top of the Ethereum network, and they are basically smart contracts. And I already told you that a smart contract is just code written by a human, and it could do pretty much anything. So in order for them to interoperate, people created these sort of standard interfaces or standard types of smart contracts. And tokens are the most common example. And when we're talking about tokens, there are sort of two main kinds of tokens that you'll hear about. The first is a fungible token, and the second is a non-fungible token. So fungible tokens were sort of used in a blockchain context first. And what fungible means, it's just a fancy word for saying that this type of asset can be exchanged one-to-one with other tokens of the same kind. A fungible token is a token that cannot be exchanged one-to-one. Or maybe it can, but it's certainly not guaranteed that those things are worth the same amount. So an example of a fungible token would be $1 or an ounce of gold. If you had an ounce of gold and I had an ounce of gold and we checked that they were both exactly 1 ounce, I would be willing to trade you. I wouldn't really, worry about it. Non-fungible tokens, some examples are artwork, houses, used bicycles. My house might be worth the same amount as your house, but I wouldn't be willing to trade you unless we had really considered that that was true. And artwork, artwork can vary wildly in value. Certainly a painting is not exchangeable one-to-one with any other painting. All right, section 3, maybe our most fun section, blockchain art. Let's start with what is an NFT, which is a question we may have already answered because NFT stands for non-fungible token. It's a token that lives in a smart contract that is not exchangeable one-to-one for any other token of the same kind. But here are some memes on the subject. And here are some key points or common misconceptions about NFTs, I guess, that we can dispel. So first, an NFT can represent many kinds of assets. So most commonly, you'll hear about it in terms of artworks, but it could also be real estate, anything that is sort of fundamentally not fungible. Also, NFTs are not new. They were invented around 2014, and we'll look at some contenders for first NFTs coming up. NFTs can exist on many different blockchain networks. So most often people are talking about them on Ethereum, but there are at least several other blockchains that support them. And finally, only a small fraction of the traffic of the Ethereum network as a whole is NFTs. I heard one estimate a couple months ago that NFTs were only 2 to 3% of the total activity on Ethereum. So I've sometimes also heard people call it the NFT network, and that is not true. If you are considering minting NFTs and maybe trying to pick a place to sell them, I can't really give you a recommendation, but I did do this marketplace breakdown across two of the sort of main categories that are different. One is whether they're open, so whether you can just sign up and start using them, or whether they're curated or invite only. And then the other difference I broke them down by is whether they're using proof of work or sort of something else as their consensus mechanism. Because it's, it's been a big dialogue in the artist community this year about whether sort of for environmentalist reasons, we should try to use more energy efficient tools to sell NFTs. So if you care about that, they're broken down this way here too. And so all of these platforms have sort of different, qualities to them. One of them is branding. Another is sort of how they treat artist resale rights, which I would recommend looking into for each of them. But when I laid them out on here, I thought it was really interesting to notice that a lot of the famous high prices are all from this sort of top left corner of things which are both curated and running on proof of work. And that there's actually, at least when I made this slide, no one in the top right corner. So there's no one doing a curated marketplace on a non-proof of work chain. And this is, really interesting. I don't have a clear hypothesis about why it's happening, but yeah, just to know. And this is a question people ask a lot, which is how are NFTs linked to the artwork? Is the sort of actual image put in the smart contract or encrypted on chain? And the answer is a bit different depending on which blockchain you're talking about, but usually no. Usually what is stored in the smart contract directly is a link to some data, which is hosted somewhere else called the metadata. And in it, there will be a link to an image. So the image itself and sort of the title and description of the work, all this sort of other information is stored at a URL or a website. And sometimes it'll be stored on a sort of other peer-to-peer decentralized network that is dedicated or devoted or aimed at file storage instead of a blockchain. But for basic purposes, no, the image is not directly in the smart contract in any way. It's hosted or stored somewhere else. All right, so let's look at some contenders for the first NFTs. Here are three of the main ones. The first is called Quantum, and it was created by Anil Dash and Kevin McCoy in 2014 at Rhizome 7on7. And it was originally called Monetized Graphics. It was launched on a blockchain called Namecoin and sold for $4. Namecoin is not really around. The artist Kevin McCoy recently reminted the original piece, but the other artist, Anil Dash, is critical of the current NFT situation. The second contender for first NFTs is called My Soul by an artist named Rhea Myers. This was also created in 2014, though I don't have the exact date. It was minted using Counterparty, which is sometimes called Bitcoin 2.0. It's a platform that grew off of the Bitcoin network and enabled many of the things we now think of as smart contracts. At the time, it was really innovative, but it doesn't really get used anymore. Interestingly, My Soul was fractionalized, which is to say it was one token broken into 100 fungible units. But I think a soul itself is probably a non-fungible asset So this might count as an NFT. And the third contender is Spells of Genesis, which also lived on Counterparty. This was and is, still exists, a blockchain-based mobile game that sold trading cards. And actually this type of thing, collectible game assets, is still a really big use case for NFTs. All right, so CryptoPunks, if you start digging into NFTs, you will come across these guys quite quickly. It was also one of the first NFT projects, probably still one of the biggest. Now these have been sold at big art auction houses like Christie's. They are very expensive. They were named in reference to the cypherpunks, who you will learn more about if you start digging into blockchain history. And it was released in June 2017. And these are CryptoKitties. CryptoKitties were launched at an Ethereum hackathon in Waterloo, Canada in October 2017. And fun fact, I was there. By December of that year, they'd become so popular that they were creating congestion problems for the Ethereum blockchain and accounted for 10% of total activity. At that time, the most expensive kitty was sold for over $100,000. The second kitty up here is called Celestial Cyber Dimension, and it was auctioned at a conference in New York in May 2018. And it broke the record and sold for over 140,000 USD. And fun fact, I was there too. The company that developed CryptoKitties was foundational to the development of the Ethereum-based NFT standard, and went on to create a new blockchain called Flow, which is designed specifically for NFTs. So just some other sort of blockchain artworks, just a selection of things that I like that you might be interested in, some from before the NFT era and some from the NFT era. This is a piece by Ria Myers also, and it's called Is Art. And basically this is a smart contract that returns the answer to this question of whether or not this contract is art. So anyone can change it at any time, and you can sort of think of it as this vote that's always open to the world. Another piece by Ria is Facecoin. Facecoin uses its own kind of proof of work and plays with the idea that artworks are already proofs of work in a way. So it creates these black and white pixel images from blockchain data, and it runs them through a facial recognition algorithm. And when one is found, a face coin is minted. This is a piece that is also actually collaborative, but it's usually attributed to Primavera de Filippi and described as a blockchain-based life form. So in these sculptures are wallets, and people who see them are encouraged to send money to them, Bitcoin or Ether, if they like them. And once enough funds have been acquired in a plantoid, it triggers a commissioning process to create a new plantoid sculpture that can itself be fed and generate more plantoids in return. This is a work by me. It was created in 2017, and it's called ClickMine. At this time in the blockchain world, you know, it was the sort of first moment that high prices had captured a lot of attention. And the token standard that people were most interested in back then, were really excited about and hyped about, was the fungible token standard. So ClickMine sort of satirizes that moment when there was all this hype by minting a fungible token that is designed to be useless. So it's a clicker game, and in a clicker game, users can usually only do one thing, which is click. With each click, the user mines some of this token. They can also purchase some power-ups. And as they do that, they're also digging this hole. And as they mine more and more, the hole gets deeper and deeper. And eventually, as you can see on the playthrough animation, eventually the hole is so big and the user is at the bottom of it. They can't see anything else anymore besides the inside of the hole, but they have lots of money. Terra Zero were also around in the early days and still active. I really love their works. It's a collective who are interested in the idea of a forest that owns itself through smart contracts. So this is a piece from 2018 called Premna Daemon. It's a bonsai tree installed in a gallery with hardware sensors monitoring its health. And there was a contract made with the people running the exhibition, a literal contract, not a smart contract, to care for it only when it asked, which it did by sending Ethereum to a wallet owned by the gallery, aka it paid for its care with the people running the exhibition. And it also had a web interface where viewers could donate, sort of like crowdfunded plant care. Flower Tokens was a Terra Zero project, specifically an early NFT project. So buyers bought these seeds as NFTs without knowing what kind of plant they were going to be. And they were installed in this vertical garden where they could be viewed on webcam. And so the questions around it were how the value of the token might change as the flower grows. There's also a reference here to the Tulip Mania, which we didn't really talk about. But if you're interested in sort of speculative bubbles and speculative assets, I would encourage you to look it up if you don't know it. Here's some more images of the flower tokens as the plants grew and gradually became this sort of jungle-y area. This is an artwork by Simon de la Riviere, who's been around for a long time in the blockchain world and was actually part of the creation of the ERC20 token standard. So quite literally, this artwork is always on sale. The person buys it, when they buy it, must specify a price that they are willing to sell it at. And then it's open for anyone to buy it at that time if they find the price acceptable. It also requires the buyer to pay a fee to the artist at 5% of the sell price that they specify. So this incentivizes them not to make the sell price too high, because 5% of it they have to give to the artist, whether it sells or not. Sort of like a tax. This is an experiment into alternative sales routes. This mechanism is called Harburger tax, if you want to find out more about it. This is a NFT artist who became really well known this year. And they've done a variety of NFT series, but what they are notable for is that their NFTs are stored entirely on chain. So they write sort of these tight little C code and they put it on the blockchain itself. And this is really exciting to the NFT community, for one thing, because it's really interesting programming, but also that thing we talked about a couple slides ago about linking to an image file externally. That is something that a lot of people feel concerned about when they buy NFTs. They feel like that link is fragile or perhaps a point of failure for the NFT. And they're right, it can be. When you are creating or buying NFTs, it's worth knowing how that stuff is stored. So when everything is actually put in the smart contract on chain, collectors get really excited. This is a project also from this year by an artist named Harm van den Dorpel called Mutant Garden. And these are NFTs that use a genetic algorithm to evolve the image. So these are NFTs that aren't static. You buy an NFT and actually the image that is depicted there is changing over time and evolving. And Harm has used these sort of genetic algorithms in his work for a long time. But this is the first big dynamically changing NFT project, I would say. And so just to briefly review what we covered, we talked first about the basics of what a blockchain is, and the various tools and platforms you might use when you're interacting with a blockchain, sort of the first steps of sending a transaction. We also talked a little bit more in depth about the mechanics of blockchains, including some of the differences between proof of work and proof of stake, and what smart contracts are. And then finally, we looked at a bunch of blockchain art, which I hope is inspiring. I encourage you to look into all these artists' work more. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and we'll now do a little Q&A period.
Sarah, maybe we can just have like a Q&A between us, very small. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to repeat the session, but the transmission has been really bad.
Yeah, it was also lagging on my end. This makes me glad we recorded in advance because the video still exists to be shared in the form.
Sí, yo creo que lo que vamos a hacer para las personas que nos están viendo es que nosotros tenemos la sesión pues completa y la subiremos en YouTube completa para que se vea bien sin este inconveniente de la transmisión en vivo. Pero pues vamos a hacer pues una pequeña sesión de preguntas junto con Sara sobre el tema que estábamos viendo en este momento.
Bueno, voy a tratar de hacer las veces de traductor. Aviso de una vez que yo no soy traductor simultáneo, entonces si tienen paciencia podemos llegar. Ojalá pues todo fluya. Sarah, I'm just saying that I will try to make as a translation the best I can. So un poco a lo que va toda esta sesión es un poco entender la blockchain como tal, la cadena de bloques, lo que compone la blockchain principalmente, que son las transacciones, y cómo estas transacciones son registradas y a través de ese registro cómo interactúan las blockchain. Y por supuesto, pues la idea de tener a Sara es conocer un poco el trabajo que está detrás de la blockchain, ¿no? El arte de la blockchain. Y allí, de pronto, lo que podemos hacer, como para no perder estos 10 minutos, es preguntarle a Sara, que es lo que voy a hacer, que nos hable un poco sobre su trabajo. Ella nos presentó una obra que se llama Click Me, muy interesante, donde la idea es que el usuario solamente puede hacer clic y a partir de este clic, cada clic es como la función del minero o del que extrae recursos y al final termina en un hueco tapado de monedas. Maybe, Sarah, you can tell us a little bit about this work, about Click Me. Maybe share your screen if you have something to show us, maybe with the presentation. Creo que sería muy interesante conocer esta obra.
Yeah, I'm just checking what I have. I didn't plan to share a screen with about ClickMine, but I can maybe do it.
Sí, aquí estamos improvisando un poco. Lamentamos un poco lo que está pasando.
So you see yourself, but now you see a file on my computer. And this is what I wanted to play. What's it going to give me? Will it play? Yeah. So this is a animation of a playthrough of ClickMine. ClickMine is a browser-based game that I made in 2017, responding to the popular token standard of the time, which was ERC20 or Fungible Token. At that time, people were doing what they called ICOs, or initial coin offerings, where they would raise a lot of money selling these tokens. It was really similar and parallel in a lot of ways to what happened with NFTs this past year. I don't know how often I should pause to let you translate.
Creo que aquí podría ser la traducción. Sí. Esta es una obra que se llama Click Me. Esta obra funciona dentro de un navegador. Fue creada en el año 2017, respondiendo a lo que sucedía en ese momento, en ese año, alrededor de la tokenización y el estándar ERC20, que corresponde a los tokens fungibles. Y durante esa época se hacían ofrecimientos iniciales de tokens, lo que llaman el ICO, para vender y poder comprar también este tipo de tokens.
And so this game is kind of satirical of what was going on in that time. The sort of story or narrative, you're watching it, is you click, and as you click, you mine this virtual piece of land, and then you keep getting more and more of the tokens, and eventually, the hole you have dug is so big that you can't see anything else anymore. You're just like alone in the darkness at the bottom of the hole that you dug, but you have lots of money. So this is all a little satirical.
Este es un juego satírico. No sé, Sarah, maybe you can just leave the screen.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Sí, este es un juego que de alguna manera es una sátira. De alguna manera tiene una narrativa, pero realmente está basada en la acción del clic. Y el clic corresponde a la acción de extracción, que es lo que hacen los mineros, y cómo a través de esta acción se va generando un hueco tan grande que al final es solamente soledad y oscuridad, pero con muchísimo dinero.
I just show you some pictures of how it's been installed. So this is the game at an exhibition set up in like a worker's cubicle. And on the ground, we put actual grass, which died over the course of the exhibition, sort of mimicking what was going on in the game. So making this environment that a click worker might inhabit Um, these are all some photos of the same installation.
Aquí vemos la obra instalada, ya de manera expositiva. Los detalles del tapete es pasto real, es un césped real que a medida que la obra permanece en el lugar, también el pasto pues muere, un poco haciendo esa analogía al trabajo de clic y que al final pues es una acción oscura y de alguna manera inútil.
And maybe, are there any questions about the, are there any questions, or would you maybe like to see different work?
Let's see if we have questions. We have someone in the chat very curious about this presentation, but I'm not sure if he is there. Rocuervo. Bueno, no, Arro, pues solamente pues tendremos que tener un poquito de paciencia para subirla. Así que yo creería que la próxima semana deben estar pendientes de nuestros comunicados y ventanas de chat para que puedan ver la sesión, por lo menos el pregrabado. Sí, bueno, de pronto podemos pasar a otra obra. Una más reciente, que no estaba en la presentación de Sara, tal vez para entender hacia dónde gira todo este universo de los tokens no fungibles. Sara, I'm just curious about your new NFT life forms. I know it is not in your presentation, but I'm very curious just to hear from you. What is this work about?
Yeah, gladly. I'll share my screen again, and then people can see some life forms, maybe, while we speak.
Este es un proyecto de Sara publicado hace menos de un mes, creo que el 14 de noviembre fue publicado, y trabaja el concepto de formas vivas.
Life forms are an NFT project that opened to the public in November. And this is the website for the life forms that you can go to if you would like. It's lifeforms.supply. A life form is an NFT-based entity that needs to be cared for in order to live. And the way that you care for them is within 90 days of receiving them, you have to give them away. So we can look at a specific life form, perhaps.
Sí, un poco para ayudar a la traducción. Este es un proyecto de NFT, de tokens no fungibles. Bueno, se pueden ver en este sitio web, lifeforms.supply. Y son una entidad que necesita ser cuidada como una forma viva. Y hay un periodo de 90 días para cuidarlo y entregarlo a otra persona.
So I'm just showing you some. And these life forms are young. This one is only 26 days old, so they will grow and change the longer they stay alive. It's kind of an experiment in a gift economy being added to the world of NFTs. I guess these life forms don't work the way NFTs normally work. The sort of normal logic is to take one and sort of stash it away and hope that it will go up in value. But of course, these life forms, that doesn't work for them. I'll show you, they also are on this big NFT marketplace.
Sara, permíteme, trato de hacer un resumen muy chiquito. El concepto que se trabaja a través de esta obra es el de la economía del dar o del regalo, de gift economy, y da una capa adicional al universo de los NFTs, contrario a lo que se conoce hoy día, donde pues es más con una lógica de lo que existe realmente ahora, con una lógica de acumular y esperar a que su precio se valorice. Y pues este proyecto va un poco en contravía, ¿no?, a esas dinámicas de acumulación y de valor.
So yeah, these are all, many people have taken on caring for a life form. And I don't know yet how long they will live for. I just show you, oh, you see all my documents. I forgot. Well, you know. Also, I did an exhibition recently at a gallery in Hamburg. And when I installed the work physically, they took the form of these sculptures, which are on phones and made of silicone, and sort of like these little bodies for the life forms to inhabit.
Mucha gente está tomando estas formas vivas. Hace poco Sara hizo una exhibición en Hamburgo, tomando el teléfono como una ventana de visualización y estas tipo de esculturas donde son colocados.
And the reason I put them on phones in particular is because the phone is already a kind of companion device in a lot of ways. It's your sort of pet, and you keep it in your pocket and you look after it by checking it regularly. So I thought it was the most fitting place to put them. And then we also did this contract on the wall, which, because life forms have a custom smart contract, I was thinking about how to make it visible to an audience. So this temporary life form foster agreement sort of translates what's in the smart contract into the form of a legal contract that you can read if you go to the exhibition.
Se colocaron en teléfonos celulares, un poco pensando en que el celular es un acompañante permanente, casi como una especie de mascota que llevamos a todos lados. Y por otro lado, también hay un muro donde se exhibe el contrato, el contrato de las formas vivas, como una ventana, ¿no?, para ver realmente de manera física, ¿no?, el contrato que está detrás, algo así como también un contrato legal entre las partes. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about this contract? What is it about? What is the what is it making this contract?
Yeah, well, it says everything that's in the Lifeforms smart contract. So you have to give them away within 90 days of receiving them. But there's quite a bit more in there also. I actually made the gallery sign it, actually. So Simon Denny, who curated the exhibition, signed it and actually had the Lifeforms during the exhibition.
Acabo de preguntarle a Sara que nos hablara un poco más sobre este contrato físico. Nos dice que es un reflejo del contrato inteligente detrás del NFT. Y básicamente, pues que debe ser cuidado en un periodo de 90 días y luego, después de esos 90 días, debe ser dado a otra persona. Pero también nos cuenta Sara que la galería donde está exhibido estas muestras de formas vivas y el contrato, también firmó el contrato, ¿no? Como un compromiso frente a estas formas vivas. Sarah, so they have only 90 days?
Yes.
And they have to give it. So the gallery will have to give it to another gallery? Or,
in this case, they give them back to me.
Okay.
But I only have them now for 90 days before I have to give them to somebody else myself. So not even I, the artist, can, I'm exempt. I also have to give away the Lifeforms within 90 days.
So en este caso, Sara tampoco tiene una excepción por ser artista. Ella también solo puede cuidar estas formas vivas durante 90 días únicamente, antes de pasarlo a otra persona.
But this contract was also a bit more strict than a normal sort of contract you might sign with an exhibition space when you put work there. For example, if the Lifeforms came... Well, actually, I have a dog, and the contract is modeled in some ways off the adoption contract I signed when I adopted my dog. So it's more strict. And if the Lifeforms come to harm there, the gallery is never allowed to exhibit my work anymore. They're never allowed to collect my work. They have to pay a fee. They have to keep the Lifeforms plugged in and away from water. And it's just like quite a long list with some very harsh terms. I'm allowed to show up there at any point and check that the Lifeforms are being properly cared for. But it's all borrowing from the actual pet adoption contract that I really did sign.
Sara nos cuenta que ya a nivel de contrato es un contrato mucho más estricto, donde las formas vivas deben ser cuidadas, un poco bajo el mismo modelo como si fuera un contrato de adopción. Y es bastante duro en su estructura. Es decir, si llega a dañarse, si la galería tendría que pagar, y al mismo tiempo pues hay unos compromisos sobre mantener la forma viva conectada, alejada del agua. Hay unas condiciones muy estrictas dentro de este contrato. Sara, so how many Lifeforms are out there? ¿Cuántas formas vivas están en este momento circulando?
Yeah, currently there are 143. And I don't limit the amount that can exist. Anyone can create one at any time. There's a small fee. I think it's around $20 right now, but it varies a little bit as the price shifts.
Nos dice Sara que hay
Unlimited.
nos dice Sara que hay 143 en este momento circulando. Que cualquiera puede hacer una de estas formas vivas, así que es de alguna manera ilimitado el suministro de estas formas.
Yeah, so this is also,
no, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say, this is also, I think, maybe like different from the normal NFT logic, which is to limit the supply, you know, and hope that because it's really scarce, it goes up in value. The life forms are not scarce, but they take work.
Sí, bueno, tal vez dentro de tu presentación, y ahorita hago como la traducción de esta pregunta, dentro de tu presentación nos has presentado unos NFTs que funcionan con esta misma lógica, en especial la obra de Terra Zero y esta otra obra de las primeras que mencionaste, que se llaman Plantoid. Voy a preguntarle a Sara un poco sobre esto. Sara, so in your presentation, you mentioned two references that somehow we can notice the influence of these artists in your work. And one of them is the work of De Filippi with the Plantoid. I would like to know how much influence all these artists have on this work, and also the Terra Zero Prema Demon work, which somehow work like on this level, you know, like taking the NFTs to another realm, and through this smart contract conditioning, you know, the interaction with the work, which is pretty much what you're doing with life forms.
Yeah, definitely. So I love the work of both Terra Zero and Primavera De Filippi. I have exhibited with both, so yeah, I think that definitely they are influences on the project. I would say the Lifeforms NFTs have more of a lineage with the Plantoid than Terra Zero, though Terra Zero has done sort of Terra Zero is more less about sort of a synthetic life form that is created through smart contracts and human interactions, and actually more often with engaging with a literal life form that is interacting with a smart contract in some way. So both the life forms and the plantoids are entirely digital, or sculptural and digital, but not, you know, well, what is alive, but but not a actual tree or something like this.
Trataré de hacer un resumen antes de que pierda el hilo. Sí, los trabajos de Terra Zero y Di Filippi han sido una influencia para formas vivas. Sara ha también participado en exposiciones junto con ellos, y sobre todo la obra Plantoid es una de las que tiene como una mayor relación con life forms, pero la diferencia es de que tanto Plantoid como la obra de Terra Zero de alguna manera no son digitales 100%, se interactúa a través de los contratos inteligentes. También tienen un carácter más de escultura.
I just checked the reference as well. There's this really, on the subject of blockchain-based life forms, one of the sort of inspirations for the Life Forms project is this poem, I guess, by Ralph Merkel, who's a computer scientist who was part of the creation of some of the cryptographic proofs used in blockchains. Anyway, I believe it's called Bitcoin, A New Form of Life. And it's kind of questioning, I don't know how serious he is, whether a blockchain itself is alive in a way. This sort of digital structure that is maintained by people, but also sort of because the actions of the people are happening on such a massive scale, in a way is independent from any individual. Maybe it's using humans to evolve. So if this is interesting to anyone, I can probably track down that text. It's kind of funny and interesting seed.
Quisiera tratar de hacer el resumen de esta parte. Sí, un poco lo que nos mencionaba Sara, es un poema de un ingeniero criptográfico que se llama Ralph Merkel, ¿sí? Él habla de la blockchain como una forma viva. Tiene un escrito que se llama Bitcoin, una nueva forma de vida. Y aquí lo que él hace es, de alguna manera, describir la blockchain como un organismo vivo que es mantenido por las personas, por los humanos, y de alguna manera este mismo sistema utiliza a los humanos para evolucionar. Sarah, can you spell the surname of Ralph?
Yeah, I'm looking for the actual link to drop in the chat, but I can't find a direct link to it right now. But this is the name.
Merkel, okay. Dani, no sé si quieras preguntar algo. De pronto ya sobre el tiempo que tenemos, que es muy poco, pues sí podemos ir como cerrando. No sé si quieras preguntar algo.
No, sí, ya nos toca ir cerrando un poco. Tampoco estaba un poco en la presentación, Sara, but I think you can share to us how this. I mean, I see that many video games technology are used in the blockchain and NFT. Also, your Ender gallery is an example. I'm curious about this, how it works with Minecraft, the Ender gallery. Estaba preguntando, pues, que hay muchos ejemplos de videojuegos que están, pues, dentro de esta tecnología del blockchain y que algunos, pues, como el que ya mencionamos antes, ¿no? Y que Sara tiene una galería que se llama Ender Gallery y que ella es una curadora de esa galería virtual que está ubicada en Minecraft. Entonces quería preguntarle cómo funciona esa tecnología.
Yeah, I've been running Ender Gallery with two collaborators, Kat and John from Specwork, who are also working with a gallery in Canada called the Mackenzie Art Gallery. I will say that Ender has nothing to do with blockchains.
Okay.
We do exhibitions in Minecraft, but it's a game project, not a blockchain project. That said, there are many game blockchain overlaps. Maybe should I keep going, or is Henry?
No, yeah.
Okay. So, for example, what's it called? There's I believe Microsoft itself actually partnered with a company to test out doing NFTs in Minecraft. The company may be Engine, but I also may be misremembering. But game items are sort of a very, very popular NFT use case. There's a Tamagotchi-like game called Avagotchi that I know is quite popular that I also have not played. And then there's also a big wave of sort of play-to-earn games where the players get payouts from interacting. It's funny because ClickMine was sort of satirizing this before it existed, but now it's a very, very real phenomenon. So yeah, Ender is not about NFTs really, but there are many gaming platforms that are bringing that in.
Si quieres hago el resumen, sí. De pronto me completas ahí, Dani. Sí, pues Minecraft no tiene como una relación directa con la blockchain, pero los trabajos de Sara en este sentido pues están relacionados con unos colegas que trabajan en SpecWork y de Mackenzie Gallery como colaboradores. Pero sí, Minecraft no tiene nada que ver con la blockchain, y ya en relación a los NFTs, ya a lo que es como el comercio dentro de los videojuegos, pues ya es un fenómeno muy, muy grande. Pues hay juegos que incorporan este tipo de tokens, pero también nos mencionaba Sara que también hay jugadores pagos en estos ambientes.
Also on the subject of games and blockchain and NFTs, not directly games necessarily, but there's a lot of activity happening in and around the metaverse or metaverses. So there are, and I'm not sure that they're quite games, but they're sort of virtual worlds where people build whatever they want really, and display NFTs and items in the virtual world are tokenized, but they're kind of free to play, or not free to play. Many kinds of play are possible. It's not sort of a narrative experience like many games are, but they're adjacent to games. And some of those would be crypto voxels, Decentraland, I believe Somnium VR is one as well. There's a few of them, and I think more starting every day.
Un poco para resumir allí, sí, hay mucha actividad alrededor de los videojuegos con los NFTs, pero sobre todo en este momento hay mucha actividad en los metaversos, que no son realmente un juego, son unos mundos virtuales donde la gente puede colocar y mostrar sus NFTs. De alguna manera también pues son una experiencia no narrativa donde se construye más como una línea aleatoria y nos estaba comentando sobre algunos proyectos de blockchain como Decentraland, VR, y Sand.
And then I have a final thing to say about games, just to talk about the crazy things out there. Besides these metaverses, there's also a trend in NFTs to make game items that have no game. So the most famous project that did this is called Loot. And it's these procedurally generated game items that are described in text, like you might find in like an old tabletop RPG type items. But there's no game. It's just the items as a collection of NFTs. So I think maybe there's something very fascinating about the worlds with no game and the game items also with no game, but the pieces getting built.
Un poco para resumir, y bueno, como lo menciona Sara, para cerrar, esto del metaverso también trae otro tipo de prácticas alrededor del comercio de los NFTs. Y en este momento existen objetos que no tienen nada que ver con los juegos. Inclusive tienen las descripciones en texto, pero no tienen una relación con un juego, parecen más coleccionables. Y bueno, desde ese punto de vista es muy fascinante cómo esto está ocurriendo, ¿no? En estos mundos virtuales. Well, I think this is time to close. We can just keep talking, and I'm sure we're going to be able to upload and put the presentation next week complete, because also we have we came in late with the translation, but this would be a good opportunity just to have the whole presentation, all your keynote uploaded in our channels. No sé, yes. Daniel, si quieres decir algo.
Section 3 is the most fun section, probably.
Yes, it is.
No, sí, de acuerdo con Henry. Ya por tiempo tenemos que cerrar y subiremos la sesión completa la próxima semana para que puedan ver como toda la charla. Pedimos disculpas nuevamente porque pues estuvo bastante bugueado, se trabó bastante la charla, y por eso decidimos pues hablar con Sara en vez de ver el pregrabado. Pero bueno.
Sí, se me ocurre que tal vez podemos compartir esa sección 3 como la teníamos previsto. Es una sección que no tiene la traducción, pero vamos a compartir unos links al sistema interplanetario de archivos, por más que suene extraterrestre, de Interplanetary File System. Sarah, I think we're going to share the third part without the translation, but it's got the transcript on the site that we uploaded to the IPFS. So
however
I'm going to do that right now.
Hay una pregunta del público, no sé si podemos leerla. Henry.
Sí, dale.
Adelante. Dice Sarah, we have a question in the chat of YouTube. A person from Santander, Colombia, is a like a state here in Colombia, and he asked, what blockchain do you recommend for beginning in the without the low cost development but with the purpose of being a bigger software, I think he's asking. Él pregunta, ¿qué blockchain recomiendas para poder iniciar a un desarrollo bajo presupuesto, pero con el propósito de un programa robusto? Yeah, like low-cost development, but with a big idea.
Yeah. Well, the development stack that I'm most familiar with is Ethereum-based. One of the nice things about working with that set of tools is that there are a number of blockchains that you can use them with. So not only Ethereum, but also Esta and Polygon. My recent NFT projects are on Polygon. When you're working with them locally, you use, I would recommend using a tool called Ganache, which runs a blockchain just on your own computer. And maybe I shouldn't get any more technical than that, but if you use Ganache locally, then you'll be able to deploy to Ethereum mainnet, Esta, Polygon, or any Ethereum-like chain.
Un poco para hacer allí el resumen, sobre todo para Latin Creativos, que nos escribió en el chat de YouTube. Sí, pues lo que nos dice Sara es que se puede trabajar sobre un stack, sobre una base que está configurada bajo la blockchain de Ethereum. Pero también hay otras blockchains basadas en esa base, como puede ser Polygon. Muchas de las obras de Sara están basadas en la blockchain de Polygon, pero también menciona un tipo de... Eso es como... This is like a compile that you can run on your computer, right? The Ganache.
Yeah, it's like a blockchain, but it's a one that you would only run locally, but you use it for testing when you're building applications.
Okay, so también nos recomienda Ganache, que es algo así como una blockchain que puede correr localmente, se utiliza para ambientes de prueba y pues tú la puedes instalar en el computador y correrla desde allí. Bueno, por cierto, acabo de poner en la ventana de Facebook el link a la IPFS, donde pueden descargar la tercera parte de la charla de Sara y también la transcripción para los que la quieran seguir. Igual ahí está muy completa y realmente es la más entretenida de las 3 secciones. Aunque las 2 primeras, que son muy técnicas, también son muy claras.
Bueno, yo creo que podemos cerrar la sesión. I think we can end this talk here.
Wonderful. I want to say thank you both for having me and also for being very graceful with our change of plans. I hope it was fun to see these other projects that we didn't plan on showing.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you
please
very much.
Take care.
Yes, you both as well.
Buena tarde para todos.